My twin sister, Audrey Goodwin, was obsessed with romance novels about rich heirs. All she wanted was to marry into money and live like some perfect socialite. She set her sights on the silver spoon scion in Jess Elton, Michael Strickland, who'd been blind after a car accident. Audrey got close by becoming his private nurse. She got tired of the work really quickly, so she asked me to cover for her. When Michael finally got his eyesight back and held a huge celebration, Audrey decided to drug him so she could slide right into the role of Mrs. Strickland. Didn't stop her this time. I even went as far as booking her a luxury suite so she could carry out her plan. In my last life, I had begged Audrey not to go through with it. I told her romance novels weren't real life, and guys like Michael were way too powerful to mess with. She had actually listened and canceled the plan. But a little while later, the news broke. My Michael secretly got married. It turned out that he'd been with someone else that very night. Just like that, Audrey's big fantasy was gone. She blamed me for ruining her dream. My parents blamed me as well. They beat me and yelled at me, saying Audrey couldn't marry Michael now because of me. One night, Audrey snapped. He came into my room with a hammer and beat me to death. Now I had been given another chance. I woke up right on the night of Michael's recovery party. Since he's better now, you don't have to pretend to be me anymore. My twin sister, Audrey Goodwin, stood in front of me. Her lips curled into a smug smile as she held a tiny pink pill bottle, acting as if it were a treasure. This stuff's amazing. It took me a lot of effort to get it, but if I just slip a pill into his drink, I'll become Mrs. Strickland in no time. She looked so pleased, as if she had succeeded in her plan to sleep with Michael Strickland, the most wanted rich heir in Jesselton. She was already picturing herself living the high life as his wife. I stayed calm. I didn't try to talk her out of it like I had in my past life. Okay, I said lightly. Good luck. But Audrey wasn't letting me off that easily. She grabbed my arm and leaned in close, whispering, "Don't forget, you've been pretending to be me for a whole year. There's so much I don't know about him and the people in his circle. Until I reach my goal, you're sticking by my side." Then she tossed me a pair of sunglasses and a mask for your face. "If anyone finds out the truth and ruins my plan, you're dead." I just gave her a little smile. Got it. After a year of being Michael's caretaker, I knew the truth. He wasn't some clueless rich boy. As the heir to a wealthy family, he was sharp and ruthless. Audrey thought she could outsmart him, but she was walking straight into her own grave, and I wasn't going to stand in her way. Audrey strutted toward him with that special glass of wine. Michael drank it without a second thought, and within minutes his handsome face turned red, his body unsteady. Audrey now back as his nurse rushed to help him upstairs. I slipped her a hotel key card on the way. "I got you room 800. Her eyes lit up. "Guess you're not totally useless. Once I'm Mrs. Strickland, I'll hook you up with a driver or a bodyguard. That should keep you comfortable for life. Help me stand guard outside. Don't let anyone ruin this. If I fail, I'll make sure Mom and Dad tear you apart." I didn't argue. I just followed upstairs, then quietly stood across the hall instead of by her door. Minutes later there was a loud thud from inside. Then the door swung open and Michael stumbled out. Michael's breathing was rough, his whole face tight with anger. He looked as if he was about to explode. Meanwhile, Audrey was sprawled on the floor, knocked out cold, with a bleeding cut on her head. I knew it. I knew there was no way she'd ever be able to pull this off. She only got a beating now. But when Michael sobered up, who knew if she'd even live to see another day? I let out a slow breath and turned to leave quietly, when suddenly someone grabbed my wrist. Next second, Michael yanked me into the room next door. I still had on a mask. My eyes, wide with fear, met his. The hotel lights were dim, stretching shadows across the walls. He pinned me against one, his voice low and hoarse. "Your scent, your figure. They feel so familiar. Do I know you?" I froze. No way could I answer him. We'd spent a whole year together. If I spoke, he'd know it was me. I couldn't let anything happen between us. If I did, I'd end up just like Audrey. I fought to break free, but even when Michael was drugged, he was still way stronger than I was. I didn't stand a chance. I opened my mouth, ready to scream for help, when he leaned down suddenly, whispering, "Your eyes, they're beautiful." I went stiff. For a second, I thought he'd recognized me. Then he ripped off my mask and kissed me. By the time it was deep into the night, Michael finally let go, his strength fading. Every part of my body hurt, but I forced myself up and put my clothes back on. I wasn't like Audrey, living in some fairy tale, believing a rich man would fall for a nobody like her. I wasn't about to get myself caught in a mess I couldn't climb out of. While he was fast asleep, I slipped out quietly. But the moment I stepped out the door, I saw a greasy, overweight man stumbling out of the next room. I looked past him into the room. Clothes were scattered everywhere. And Audrey was on the bed, her dress torn completely out cold. As I recalled how she had murdered me in my past life, I just shut the door quietly and walked away. When I got home, my parents rushed to greet me, both carrying plates piled with food, their faces glowing with joy. "Audrey, darling, you're finally back." But then their smiles froze. "Aurora, why are you here? Where's Audrey? Didn't we tell you? You're supposed to stay by her side and protect her. Make sure it all goes according to plan." I stared at them, amazed at how deep their favoritism ran. If Audrey and I didn't look exactly alike, I'd really believe I was adopted. My face stayed cold as I walked past them. "I'm just here to pack my stuff. I'm moving out." My mother's face twisted ugly with anger. "What the hell are you talking about? How are you going to afford rent?" As I folded clothes into my bag, I spoke slowly, almost calmly. "If Audrey really ends up marrying Michael, his family will come to visit. What if they saw me and figured it all out? But I can stay if you want." The moment they realized my being around could ruin Audrey's chances, their attitude flipped. They quickly chased me out. "Get out. You're bad luck anyway. I wouldn't want you ruining a good thing for Audrey and bringing our family down with you." By the time I was headed downstairs with my bags, I ran into Audrey hobbling through the door. Her clothes were ripped, as if someone had yanked them apart. Bruises covered her arms and legs. Her face was practically glowing. "Mom, Dad," she said proudly. "Michael warmed me up, but I think it's done. We're good now." I could tell by her smirk that she had no idea what really happened. After she got knocked out, Audrey glanced at me with that same smug look, then noticed the suitcase in my hand. Her lips curled into a cold little smile. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "My wedding's pretty much set, but you're not getting any younger. And there's still no ring on your finger. I don't want you spending the rest of your life alone." Audrey's eyes sparkled. "Aurora, I found you the perfect match. Mr. Myers offering $200,000 as a bride price." Mother nearly jumped with joy. "This is perfect. You must agree right away." I let out a sharp laugh. "He's 60. If you want the money so badly, marry him yourselves. Don't push me into it." Mother's hand cracked across my face. Father's voice thundered right after. "Shut your mouth. Who do you think you are to be picky? You couldn't land a rich man if your life depended on it. Do as we say." My cheek burned, but I bit down hard and asked through clenched teeth, "Why twins? Why does she get everything while I'm the one you're selling off?" They exchanged a look before father said coldly, "The fortune teller was right. You were born unlucky. Your sister's the blessed one, the one who will bring this family prosperity." A bitter laugh escaped me. So all the years of pain and humiliation, just because of some nonsense words from a fortune teller? I couldn't help but laugh. Whatever scraps of hope and love I still held for this family were shattered completely. "Fine. I take today's humiliation as paying them back for raising me. I'm not marrying that old man. If you need money, figure it out yourselves. If you've never liked me, I'll leave. I don't care about your stupid marry rich dreams." I grabbed my suitcase and turned to go. Audrey's cold voice stopped me. "You don't want to get married, fine. But if you move out, you'd better not be wandering around too much. And make sure your phone's on. 24/7. If I call, you have to pick up within 3 seconds. I'm about to become Mrs. Strickland. He'll propose to me and marry me soon. But I don't know much about how to take care of him. When he asks, you'll have to feed me the answers. Got it?" I turned my head and looked at her. Audrey tossed her hair back and pulled out her phone, snapping a picture of the bruises on her skin. They weren't shameful, but her golden ticket into high society. My parents were all smiles, fussing over her proudly, as if she were already some rich man's wife. They chimed in, "Dear best to help Audrey. Once she marries Mr. Strickland, maybe she'll help you too. She can introduce you to a driver or a bodyguard who works for wealthy families. That's the only way you'll find someone." I almost laughed. They had no idea what really happened that night. I had no clue what it meant to cross Michael. The Stricklands weren't just old money. They were powerful and untouchable. Anyone who tried to scheme against them would get destroyed, not rewarded. The only smart thing to do was to cut ties and walk away. We're not that close. So don't bother trying to set me up with someone. You live your lives and I'll live mine. Audrey and I had switched places completely. For the next few days, everything stayed quiet. There was not a single word about the most wanted rich heir of Jezelton being Trick. Then came the day Michael had to go for a checkup, and Audrey told me to wait near the hospital in case she needed me. I went not just because she told me to, but because I wanted to see how he was doing. I hid behind my sunglasses and mask, watching them carefully. What I saw made no sense. They were laughing together, looking into each other's eyes, like something out of a movie. To anyone else, They looked like the perfect couple, completely in love. I couldn't wrap my head around it. What was Michael planning? Why wasn't he furious with her? Why was he suddenly acting so close to her? I stood there for so long, lost in my thoughts, that I didn't even notice when they walked in my direction. As they passed by me, Michael suddenly stopped in his track. The sudden halt made Audrey stumble in her high heels, her perfectly manicured hand clutching his tailored suit jacket for balance. Michael? Darling, what is it? Audrey's voice was honeyed, a sickly sweet tone she had been practicing in the mirror for days. Michael didn't look at her. His gaze, sharp and piercing beneath his dark eyebrows, was locked onto me. Even behind my oversized sunglasses and the thick medical mask covering half my face, I felt the immediate, terrifying weight of his attention. It was as if his newly healed eyes could strip away the cheap disguise, peering straight through to my soul. My breath caught in my throat. I froze, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of my worn beige trench coat, willing myself to become invisible. I shouldn't have come.
It was a mistake.
Michael took a half step toward me. The air between us seemed to thicken. I could smell his cologne, a crisp blend of cedar and bergamot that instantly dragged my mind back to that dark hotel room, to the heat of his skin and the desperate, bruising press of his lips against mine. "Do I know you?" His voice rumbled, deep and resonant. It was the exact same tone he had used that night. "Your scent, your figure? Do I know you?" Panic flared in my chest like a struck match. I lowered my head, shaking it once in a brief, jerky motion, and turned on my heel. I didn't run. Running would draw too much attention, but I walked as fast as my trembling legs could carry me, slipping past a group of nurses and ducking into the crowded hospital lobby. Behind me, I heard Audrey's nervous laughter. "Michael, she's just a stranger. Probably sick. Let's go, the car is waiting." "She smelled like..." Michael's voice trailed off, fading into the noise of the sliding glass doors. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I pushed through the exit and disappeared into the city streets. For the next month, I completely cut ties with my past. I changed my phone number, blocked my parents on every social media platform, and moved to a small, inexpensive apartment on the outskirts of Jesselton. I found a job as an archivist at the city library, a quiet, dusty sanctuary where the only things I had to deal with were old records and the faint scent of decaying paper. It was peaceful. It was mine. I tried to convince myself that Audrey had gotten away with it. Michael was a busy man, running a multi-billion-dollar empire. He wouldn't have time to dwell on a fleeting scent or a nagging suspicion. If Audrey played her cards right, maybe she really would become Mrs. Strickland. But deep down, I knew better. I had spent a year as Michael's eyes. I had read him quarterly reports, guided his hand as he signed contracts, and listened to him ruthlessly dismantle rival companies over the phone. Michael Strickland was a predator in a tailored suit. He noticed everything. He forgot nothing. And Audrey? Audrey was sloppy. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was cataloging a stack of 19th-century land deeds, my burner phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but a sense of dread compelled me to answer. "Aurora." The voice was a harsh, frantic whisper.
"Audrey."
"How did you get this number?" I asked coldly, stepping into the narrow aisle between two towering bookshelves. "Mom hired a private investigator to track your employment records," she snapped, impatient. "Listen to me. I don't have time for your attitude. I need you to tell me about the Chopin piece." I frowned. "What?" "The Chopin piece," Audrey hissed. "Michael took me to a private orchestra performance last night. They played something, and he leaned over and asked if I remembered the rainy afternoon we listened to it in his study. He asked what I had said about the crescendo." "Aurora, what the hell did you say about the crescendo?" My grip on the phone tightened. Michael was testing her. He had never been a fan of classical music. He tolerated it, but he had explicitly told me he found Chopin overly sentimental. That rainy afternoon, I had told him the crescendo felt like a desperate attempt to hold onto something that was already gone. He had laughed and called me a cynic. "Tell him you said it was romantic," I said flatly. "Are you sure?" Audrey demanded. "You're the one who wants to be his wife, Audrey. Use your own brain." I hung up, removed the SIM card, and snapped it in half. A week later, the local tabloids ran a front-page story, "Strickland heir seen with mystery blonde." The accompanying photo showed Michael and Audrey getting into a sleek black Maybach. The headline read like a fairy tale, but analyzing the photo, I saw the tension. Michael's posture was rigid, his jaw clenched. Audrey was clinging to his arm, flashing a megawatt smile at the cameras, but her eyes looked panicked.
It wasn't just the Chopin test.
Audrey didn't know how Michael liked his coffee, black, no sugar, specifically from a small roaster in Colombia. She didn't know that he hated the smell of lavender because it reminded him of the hospital where he woke up blind. She didn't know that when he was deep in thought, he traced the rim of his glass with his index finger. She had taken my face, but she couldn't steal my memories. Meanwhile, Audrey's own nightmare was just beginning. It started with a text message she couldn't ignore, sent to her personal phone from an encrypted number. Nice dress. Pity it got torn at the Grand Hotel. Room 800. I have pictures. Audrey's world stopped spinning. Room 800. That was the room next to Michael's. The room where she had woken up bruised and battered. The room where she thought Michael had taken her in his drugged frenzy. She arranged to meet the blackmailer in a dingy alleyway behind a dive bar. When she saw the greasy, overweight man waddling toward her, a sickening wave of realization washed over her. It wasn't Michael. It was never Michael. 2 million. The man, Bruno, grunted, flashing a vulgar grin that revealed yellowing teeth. Or, these pictures go to the tabloids. And to your handsome billionaire boyfriend. Audrey was trapped. She couldn't ask Michael for the money. He would demand to know why she needed it. She couldn't ask our parents. They had drained their savings buying Audrey designer clothes to keep up appearances. In her desperation, she turned her wrath toward the only person she could blame. Me. It was raining hard the night she found me. I was locking up the library, pulling up the hood of my jacket, when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. My parents stepped out, flanking Audrey. They looked like a lynch mob. You ungrateful little bitch. My mother screamed over the sound of the rain, lunging forward to grab my hair. I stepped back quickly, her manicured claws catching only air. Stay away from me, I warned, my voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking in my veins. You ruined everything, Audrey shrieked. Her perfectly styled hair was plastered to her face, her expensive makeup running down her cheeks in dark, muddy streaks. You set me up. You put that fat pig in my room on purpose. I didn't put anyone in your room, Audrey, I said coldly. You walked into your own trap. I just didn't stop you. My father stepped forward, his face purple with rage. You will fix this, Aurora. You will go to the bank, take out whatever loans you can, and pay this man off. If you don't, I swear to God. You swear to God what? I interrupted, my voice slicing through the heavy rain. You'll beat me again? You'll disown me? You already have. I owe you nothing. You want to save Audrey's precious fantasy? Sell the house. How dare you, my mother wailed. You are a monster, Audrey sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at me. I am going to marry Michael Strickland. I am going to be the most powerful woman in this city, and I will make sure you starve in the gutter. Then you'd better start acting like his fiancée and pay your own blackmailers, I replied, turning my back on them. I walked away into the dark, ignoring their screams and curses. I didn't know that my parents' little ambush had been watched. 2 days later, I returned to my apartment to find the front door unlocked. My blood ran cold. I reached into my bag, my fingers curling around the cold metal of my keys, ready to use them as a weapon. I pushed the door open slowly. Sitting in the solitary armchair in the corner of my tiny living room was Michael Strickland. He looked entirely out of place in my cramped, cheap apartment. He was wearing a dark, bespoke suit that probably cost more than my entire building. His legs were crossed elegantly, a manila folder resting on his lap. Hello, Aurora, he said. His voice was soft, but it carried a dangerous edge that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I swallowed hard, refusing to show fear. Mr. Strickland, how did you get in here? The lock is cheap. I strongly suggest you upgrade it, he replied casually, tapping the manila folder. I've been looking for you. You have my sister. I don't see why you'd need me. Michael stood up, his tall frame suddenly making the room feel suffocatingly small. He walked toward me with slow, deliberate steps, like a panther stalking a deer. I backed up until my shoulders hit the closed door. Your sister, Michael said, stopping mere inches from me. He reached out, his warm fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. I shivered involuntarily. Your sister doesn't know how I take my coffee. Your sister thinks I like Chopin. Your sister doesn't have a small, crescent-shaped scar on her left collarbone. His gaze dropped to the collar of my shirt, where the faint white scar, a souvenir from a childhood fall that Audrey had never suffered, was hidden. She also, Michael continued, his voice dropping to a husky whisper, didn't taste like you. She didn't feel like you in the dark. I closed my eyes, a tear escaping and trailing down my cheek. Michael, please. Look at me, he commanded, not harshly, but with an authority that demanded obedience. I opened my eyes. His dark eyes were blazing with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and something else, something raw and hungry. Why did you leave? Because I know how your world works, I whispered, my voice trembling. Audrey thinks life is a romance novel. I know it's a chessboard. I was a pawn. If I stayed, you would have destroyed me. You think so little of me? I think you are a man who protects what is his and destroys what threatens him. Audrey tried to drug you. She tried to force you into marriage. I helped her by giving her the room key. I'm just as guilty. Michael's jaw clenched. You didn't drug me. And you didn't stay in room 800. I had my security team pull the hotel footage, Aurora. It took weeks because someone had bribed the manager to wipe the servers, but we recovered the backups. I saw Audrey go into 800. I saw her get knocked out by the man who was already renting the room. And I saw you. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. I saw you waiting in the hall. I saw myself pull you into room 801. And I saw you leave, alone, 3 hours later. You didn't ask for money. You didn't run to the press. You just vanished. I wanted to live quietly. I breathed. I spent a year in darkness, Michael said, his hands coming up to cup my face. You were my only light. You read to me. You laughed with me. You didn't treat me like a broken billionaire. You treated me like a man. Do you have any idea what it felt like to regain my sight, only to find a stranger wearing your face, mimicking your voice, pretending to be the woman I fell in love with? My heart stopped. Fell in love with? Michael. I played along, he confessed, his thumb stroking my cheek. I played along with Audrey because I needed to know the truth. I needed to know where you were. I needed to know why she was doing it. And I needed to make sure that when I finally burned her little fantasy to the ground, there would be nothing left. He stepped back, handing me the manila folder. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs. Audrey meeting Bruno. Bank statements showing my parents transferring money to a shady offshore account to pay the blackmail. And a thick, formal invitation card. What is this? I asked. That, Michael said, a terrifyingly cold smile playing on his lips, is an invitation to my engagement party. I'm officially announcing my intent to marry Audrey Goodwin this Friday. I stared at him, bewildered. Why? Because, Michael said smoothly, a fall from the top of the stairs hurts much more than a trip on the bottom step. I want you there, Rora. I want you to watch. The next few days were a blur. Audrey was over the moon. She called my old number, realizing I had disconnected it, and actually showed up at the library just to gloat. I told you, she practically sang, leaning over the librarian's desk. He's buying me a 10-carat diamond. We're hosting the party at the Jesselton Grand, the same hotel where we spent our first night together. Poetic, isn't it? Mom and Dad are buying new outfits. You should come, Aurora. You can wear one of my old dresses. It'll be a good opportunity for you to meet the catering staff. Maybe you can bag a waiter. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied calmly. What Audrey didn't know is that while she was busy trying on custom-made gowns and bossing around event planners, Michael was meticulously setting the stage for her execution. He had bought Bruno's silence and his cooperation. He had gathered every piece of evidence of the Goodwins' fraud, their extortion attempts, and Audrey's plot to drug him. Friday evening arrived. The ballroom of the Jesselton Grand was an ocean of crystal chandeliers, imported orchids, and the city's elite. The air buzzed with the clinking of champagne glasses and the murmur of high society. I arrived quietly, wearing a simple, elegant midnight blue gown that Michael had sent to my apartment. My hair was swept up, and for the first time in my life, I didn't try to hide my face. I looked exactly like Audrey, yet completely different. Where she wore heavy makeup and a haughty sneer, I wore a quiet, steady resolve. As I slipped into the back of the ballroom, I saw my parents. They were holding court near the ice sculpture, bragging loudly to a group of bored-looking executives about their brilliant daughter. Then, the grand doors opened, and Audrey made her entrance. She looked radiant, I had to admit. She was wearing a dazzling white gown that looked suspiciously like a wedding dress. Michael walked beside her, impeccably dressed in a black tuxedo. He looked like a king, but his eyes were entirely unreadable. The crowd applauded. Audrey waved, soaking in the adoration, her chest puffed out with triumph. She led Michael to the center stage, grabbing a microphone from EMC. "Thank you all for coming," Audrey beamed, her voice echoing through the massive hall. "Tonight is the happiest night of my life. Michael and I have overcome so much together. Through darkness and light, our love has only grown stronger." She turned to Michael, expecting him to take the microphone and declare his undying love. Michael took the microphone. He looked out over the crowd. His eyes scanned the room, bypassing the billionaires, the politicians, and the socialites, until they found me standing in the shadows at the back. He held my gaze for a long second, a silent promise passing between us. "Audrey speaks of darkness and light," Michael began, his voice echoing with a chilling calmness. "It's true. When I was blinded in that accident, my world went completely dark. But I had someone by my side. A nurse who didn't just tend to my physical wounds, but kept my spirit alive. A woman whose voice became my favorite song, whose touch became my anchor." Audrey smiled blushingly, placing a hand over her heart. The crowd awed in unison. "However," Michael continued, the temperature in the room seeming to drop 10 degrees, "the woman standing next to me is not that woman." The silence that fell over the ballroom was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Audrey's smile froze. Michael, darling, what are you talking about? It's me. Is it? Michael turned to face her. The facade of the loving fiancé vanished, replaced by the ruthless corporate predator. Is it you, Audrey? Or is it your twin sister, Aurora, whom you forced to act as your stand-in because you found caring for a blind man too exhausting? A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. My parents, standing by the ice sculpture, suddenly looked as if they had swallowed glass. Michael, you're confused. Audrey stammered, panic rising in her throat. She tried to grab his arm, but he stepped back, looking at her with pure disgust. I took care of you. We made love in this very hotel. Michael signaled to the sound engineer at the back of the room. The massive LED screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a monogram of their initials, suddenly flickered. We did not, Michael said, his voice ringing out over the murmurs. You attempted to drug me with a date-rape narcotic. You intended to force yourself on an incapacitated man to trap me into marriage. But you were careless, Audrey. The screen lit up. It was security footage from the hallway of the hotel. High definition. Crystal clear. The crowd watched as a stumbling, red-faced Michael was half-dragged by Audrey. They watched me hand her the keycard. They watched Audrey enter room 800. And then, the footage fast-forwarded. It showed Audrey, completely knocked out, being pushed out of the room momentarily before being dragged back in by a large, sweaty man. Audrey let out a blood-curdling scream. Turn it off. Turn it off. The man in the video, Michael's voice boomed, is Bruno Vance, a local petty criminal. He has provided a full sworn statement, along with photographic evidence of his encounter with Miss Goodwin. Lies, my mother shrieked, pushing through the crowd. He's lying. Aurora did this. Aurora set her up. Michael's gaze snapped to my mother, his eyes narrowing into deadly slits.
Ah, yes.
The loving parents, who, instead of stopping their daughter's criminal behavior, decided to hire a private investigator to harass Aurora and then actively participated in paying hush money to Mr. Vance to cover up the scandal. He snapped his fingers. Men in dark suits, his private security team, began moving through the crowd, blocking the exits. At the same time, the heavy oak doors at the back opened, and uniformed police officers marched in. Audrey collapsed onto the stage, sobbing hysterically, her perfect white dress pooling around her like a deflated parachute.
No.
I'm supposed to be Mrs. Strickland. I deserve this. I deserve the money. Michael looked down at her, his expression devoid of any pity. You deserve exactly what you earned, Audrey. Nothing. The police officers approached the stage, reading Audrey her rights. Attempted drugging, conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion. They handcuffed her, pulling her roughly to her feet. My parents tried to run, but Michael's security team intercepted them, handing them over to the authorities for their involvement in the blackmail payoff and financial fraud. As my father was led away in cuffs, he locked eyes with me standing in the back. There was no apology in his eyes, only bitter, venomous hatred. I stared back, feeling absolutely nothing. The chains they had wrapped around me for 24 years were finally broken. As the chaos subsided and the shocked guests began to whisper fiercely among themselves, Michael stepped off the stage. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. He walked straight down the center aisle, his eyes fixed only on me. When he reached me, he didn't say a word. He simply reached out, his large, warm hand enveloping mine. The tension that had been radiating from him melted away, leaving only the man I had come to know in the quiet, dark hours of his recovery. It's over, he said softly. You're a very dramatic man, Mr. Strickland, I managed to say, though my voice shook slightly with adrenaline. A genuine, breathtaking smile broke across his face. I told you, Aurora. I protect what's mine. Let's go home. 3 years later, the sun was setting over the Jesselton coastline, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of gold and crimson. I stood on the balcony of our cliffside home, holding a mug of tea, the salty breeze gently tangling my hair. Life had moved on. The scandal had rocked the city for months, a juicy cautionary tale of greed and hubris. Audrey was currently serving a 5-year sentence in a state correctional facility. The reality of prison life had shattered her completely. Without her designer clothes, her expensive makeup, and the constant validation she craved, she was a hollow shell. She wrote to me once, begging for money, for the prison commissary. I didn't reply. I simply threw the letter into the fireplace. My parents had avoided jail time by pleading ignorance and testifying against Bruno, but they were financially ruined. Michael had legally ensured that they could never come within 100 miles of me. Last I heard, they were living in a cramped trailer park 2 states over, entirely forgotten by the society they had so desperately wanted to impress. Strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind, pulling my back against a solid, warm chest. Michael rested his chin on the top of my head, breathing in deeply. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Strickland?" he murmured, his voice sending a familiar, pleasant shiver down my spine. I smiled, leaning into his embrace. The heavy diamond ring on my left hand caught the fading sunlight, scattering rainbows across the balcony railing. "Just thinking about romance novels," I said playfully. "And how they always get it wrong." Michael turned me around in his arms, his dark eyes, sharp, clear, and endlessly loving, looking down into mine. "How so?" "They make it seem like the rich, powerful man falls for the girl because of fate," I said, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "But it's not fate. It's choices. Audrey chose to be greedy. My parents chose to be cruel. And I chose to walk away. And I," Michael said, leaning down to brush his lips against mine, "chose to follow you." He kissed me, a deep, lingering promise of safety, passion, and a future built on truth. The shadows of my past, the twin sister who had tried to steal my life, the parents who had treated me like dirt, they were all gone, faded into insignificance. I wasn't a pawn anymore. I wasn't a stand-in. I was exactly where I belonged, holding the light in the darkness, and I was never letting go.